Welcome, Abby. And welcome to everyone else as well. This is September 25th. We are correcting section 2.2 on operations with rational numbers in decimal form. Question 4 gives us the the sum and difference, which is a fancy word for addition and subtraction of rational numbers in decimal form. We can do this without a calculator. First part says to estimate. So for A, I'm going to estimate all of them right away and just kind of keep them there. So when I estimate, I'm going to round to the nearest whole number with each of the numbers. So 0.98 will become positive 1, and negative 2.9 will become negative 3. So when I estimate, my estimation is going to mean the answer to this is going to be approximately equal to negative 2. Yeah, is that okay? Am I wrong? The second question, if I estimate, it'll be 5.46 will just become 5 because we round down if it's not higher than 0.5. Take away 3, which I think everyone in the room knows is positive 2 for an estimation. Our next one would be negative 4 plus negative 6, which will give us an answer when we work it out to be approximately negative 10. And our final answer will be negative 1 take away a negative 7, which if we keep flip change, which is what Mr. Mack prefers, not all teachers do, your estimation will be approximately equal to 6. So once you have the estimations, you can go ahead and make the calculations. If you're using pen and paper, here I would say, what do you have more, positives or negatives? You have more negatives. So the difference between your negatives and your positives, make sure you line up your decimals. The difference between them will be your answer to determine how many more positives you have. 1 take away 8, you need to borrow. 11 take away 8 is 3. Borrow, 18 take away 9 is 9, and 1 take away 0 is 1. Therefore, your actual answer, we say estimation is this. Your calculation is negative 1.93. For the second question, it's just take away, this is actually a question from grade 6. When you look at it, you don't need to keep flip change here. Just subtract. 6 take away 6, 3, 2, real easy one. Since your estimation was 2, your calculation is 2.3. For C, what do you have more? You're adding them, so you're going to combine them. You have negatives and negatives, just negatives, which means you're actually just going to add together both rational numbers, and the answer is going to be your negative value. So that's going to be 6, 9, and 9. Your calculation will be negative 9.96. Pretty close to your estimation. And finally, your last question. Keep flip change. Now that you do that, you say, what do I have more of, positives or negatives? I have more positives. The difference between the amount of positives you have and the amount of negatives you have is 5.34. Therefore, your calculation is 5.34. Okay? Any questions with that? Are we okay with it? Sometimes it helps to think about money. So if I'm looking at this question and I want to think about it in context rather than just the algorithm or the procedure of how to get the answer, I can think I owe $1.49. The negative would mean I owe $1.49, and I have $6.83. So if I pay off all my debt because I owe $1.49 from the money I have, I would still have $5.34 left over. Sometimes when you contextualize the question, it makes more sense. Okay. Question number 6 is our multiplication and division of rational numbers in decimal form. Estimate and calculate. So if I estimate, my estimation, use my black marker again, will be 3 times negative 3, or my estimation will mean my answer should be approximately negative 9. This is a tricky question because we only need to estimate here. And again, if I ignore the signs, if I write this down here, what I want you to do every time with estimation is think money. This will be the money you have divided into piles. That's what I want your division sign to mean. So I want this money to be the money you have. I want this division symbol to represent divided into piles. And I want your 250 in the size of the pile, if this makes sense to you. I'll put size of pile. Okay? So if we contextualize a division question to think of it that way, I have $3.25. I need to divide it into piles of $2.50. If you don't see 250, add a zero there. You see $2.50 now. So I have 325 and I have to make piles of 250. Can I make a pile of 250 with my 325? Yes, I can. Can I make two piles? No, I can't. So when I estimate, I'm going to say, I think I can make like maybe 1.5 piles, roughly. I don't know exactly, but it seems kind of pretty close that when I estimate it, I can make negative 1.5 piles. Now, I got my negative sign just for my sign rules, negative divided by a positive. So my estimation is just going to be negative 1.5. We'll come back to it in a second. I'll erase this. I'll leave that one up there. Next one, a negative 6 times a negative 6. And notice I'm using the dot. That can also mean multiplication. My actual calculation will be approximately positive 36. And going to the next question, D, I have $4.37. I have to divide it into piles of 95 cents. Here I can use my rounding to make this a little easier for me. I can make this a little easier. I'm looking at 437, looking at 95. I'm like, well, why did I make my question numbers that I know the answer to? So I have negative $4 or $4 divided into piles of $1. So I'm going to change this to 4 divided by 1, which I can do, right? If I make it into that, my estimation would be approximately negative 4. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I can make roughly 4 piles of 95 cents with $4.37. Okay. Calculation. For our calculation, multiplication you have to do on pencil paper. Division, you can just use a calculator. So here, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take 2.7 times negative 3.2. I'm going to drop my decimals and drop my negative signs and just use the basic algorithm you learned back in grade 5. Now, if you struggle with it, try practicing it. Eventually, you might get it. Each place value must be multiplied by the first. So 2 times 7 is 14. Carry your 1. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. Second number, second space. Put a 0 to make sure you start in the second space. 3 7 is 21. 3 2 is 6 plus 2 is 8. I forgot to carry my 2, by the way. Add them together. What do you got? Bippity boppity boo. 864. Go back into your question itself. 864 is your answer. Since your estimation was that, you know your answer is going to be negative 8.64, based solely on your calculation and your estimation. Next question, B, just use a calculator. In order to answer this question, I have to know how to put it into a calculator properly. So 3.25, but it has to be negative. So I'm going to drop in my plus minus to make that negative. Divided by 2.5 equals button. Negative 1.3 is my calculation, which is pretty darn close to what my estimation was. 5555, drop my decimals. 25, 27, 25, 27, 5, 12, 10, 3, 3025. Since my estimation was 36, my calculation, the only place I can put my decimal would be between the 0 and the 2. And finally, your last question, 4.37. And actually, you know what? You don't really need the positive negative signs if you're real strong with your sign rules. If you know you're dividing two negatives, you know it's going to be a positive. Don't worry about the negative signs. But if you struggle, just drop her in there. It'll do the sign law for you. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. Insignificant. Doesn't matter. Your answer is 4.6. So my estimation was negative 4. My calculation will be negative 4.6. Question number 8 is our BEDMAS. And technically, for this question, I'm totally okay with you guys just using for BEDMAS questions, unless I ask you to do it without a calculator. You're okay to do it with a calculator here. It's more just keeping your stuff organized. So from this point forward, if you tried it without a calculator, you realize it took you a long time. We'll do it without a calculator today just to see how easy it is. So 2.1 times 3.2 plus 4.3 times negative 1.5. Truth be told, if this was a real question in the real world, there wouldn't be anybody in the world that would try to do this by paper pencil. So we're going to do it just organizing our data, and this is how I want you to do it. So first, write out your question, and then realize that we have multiplication, addition, and multiplication, and realize that when you have more than one operation, you follow BEDMAS. How many steps does BEDMAS have? I'll write it out for you. How many steps? Raise your hand if you can tell me how many steps there are in BEDMAS. Yes, Tiana, what do we want to go with? What's your guess? Anyone? Sophie says 6, and Sophie is wrong. How many steps in BEDMAS?
3.
Joey says 3, and Joey is wrong. 3 is the correct answer. The 3 steps, or the 4 steps, sorry. Brackets first. If you have brackets, do them. Now remember, are these brackets? No, those are parentheses used to separate your sign from your multiplication sign. So those are not do these first brackets. If there are do these first brackets, something like this, that's a bracket because that has something to be done inside them, right? This one here, there's nothing to do, so it's not a B. It's just separating it from the multiplication sign. That's step 1. Step 2 is any exponents, which we will learn this year. So chapter 3, which is your next chapter, is all about exponents. So when you did in grade 7 pi r squared, right, your 2 is your exponent, right? So when we have exponents, these little small subscript numbers that are up in the corner, those would be done next. And step 3 is your division and multiplication in the order they appear from left to right. If there are division and multiplication, it's not division first, multiplication second. It's any division and or multiplication from left to right. And then finally, your 4th step is your addition and subtraction. Some of you keep forgetting that, and it's important that you don't. I had a teacher 20 years ago was teaching math, and he taught math for like 20 years, and he did not know it was division and multiplication at the same time from left to right. He always said division first, then multiplication. Yes, we had what was it called? BEDMAS? Yeah. In grade 9, we introduced the E, so it's now BEDMAS. But with that said, that means we have to do our multiplications first. I'll extend it to here, not our addition. So I'll get rid of this little, there, throw that away. So we're going to do our multiplications first with a calculator, and I'm going to go 2.1 times 3.2. If I'm guessing, I'm going to say it's like 6.5, maybe something like that. 6.72. Is it positive or negative? Negative, because we have opposite signs. So negative 6.72 is this. I'm going to put my plus sign down. Grab my calculator again. Slide her over here. 4.3 times 1.5. Now this is interesting. I can actually do this in my head, because if I multiply 4.3 by 1, I get 4.3. If I multiply 4.3 by a half, remember we talked about it yesterday, half of 4.3. So half of $4.30 is $2.15, right? $2.15 plus $4.30 is $6.45. This should be 6.45, and it is. Right? There's how you do mental math. Is it positive or negative? Negative. Do you guys follow that, what I just did there? So if I think about $4, I'll just do it real slow again. $4.30 multiplied by 1.5. If I multiplied it by 1, I get $4.30. If I multiply it by a half, I get half of 4.30, which is $2.15. Combine 4.30 with 2.15, you get 6.45. Last step, I don't need a calculator because I could probably do this without it, but we'll use it anyway. I'm adding them together, which if I estimate, I'm guessing it's going to be roughly negative 13, roughly. So 6.472 negative plus 6.45 negative equals negative 13.17. Okay. Expectation for me, always the same thing. Write down your expression, simplify the parts you need to, write them directly under it, and then write your answer. For me, I like the look of it. I like the way it's organized. I always like this inverted it cascades downwards, becoming smaller and smaller as it gets to the bottom. You do you. All I ask you to do is don't use equal signs. For whatever reason, it's not that important, but I don't like the look of them. If you want to use them, fine, whatever. But I like it looking like that. If I could be like Mac. Question number B, letter B. It says negative 3.5 multiplied by brackets the difference between here. So again, although it's not written, we have two operations. We have a multiplication that exists between the number and the brackets, and we have a subtraction. But these are brackets for do these first. So the first thing I'm going to do is do 4.8 take away 5.6, right, Deanna? Is that going to be a positive number or a negative number? It's going to be negative because we're taking away more than we have. So 4.8 take away 5.6, important to kind of think of that, negative 0.8. So these brackets will work out to be this. This 3.5 stays outside the brackets. And now we have our last step, which is multiplication. I still have my number here. Multiplied by 3.5 will make the negative sign. Your final answer is a positive 2.8. We good with that? The last question in this particular question is negative 1.1 multiplied by, actually they use square brackets here. Well, I'll ask you, why do they use square brackets? That's a better question for me. Why are they using square brackets here instead of round brackets? No one knows? Mike, I bet you know.
Because there's already a bracket.
Jojo got it. Because there's already a round bracket inside the brackets, they don't want to use round brackets again, because if they did, it ends up looking like this. I don't know if I can get a smaller eraser here. If they used it, it looks like this, which makes it look a little difficult to see. But if you use a square bracket, oh, sugar. If you use a square bracket, it just defines it better. It looks better. It looks more easy to see. So now I have brackets again. That's inside I have to do first. So this negative 1.1 is going to stay outside the brackets. I'm going to switch to round because I know I'm going to simplify it. Keep, flip, change. Most of you don't need to grab a calculator right away, right? Lincoln, if I said 2.3 plus 0.5, could you do that in your head? What would you get? Adding, yep. Right, because you have $2.30 plus 50 cents, $2.80 or 2.8. Good, excellent. Once you have that written, you said, you know what, you're proud of yourself. You didn't grab the calculator. You thought for yourself. You were a big boy, big girl. I could do this without a calculator too. What's 1 times 2.8? 2.8. What's 0.1 times 2.8? Just have to move the decimal one place over. Decimal 2.8, right? If you multiply it by 0.1, you'd get decimal 2.8. $2.80 plus 28 cents is $3.08. So it should be 3.08 if I work that out properly. 1.1 times 2.8, 3.08. Is it positive or negative? Negative. Okay. Any questions on that?